Welcome to another edition of HBCU Sports. We interrupt this the broadcast of the Two Americas basketball game to bring you another Monday night of HBCU Sports Talk. I'm Kendrick. That's Chris, and below me is Jared Hoffman, who is intently watching the race war right now. In between our segments, we're going to have a pretty interesting show for you guys tonight. Actually, going to start off, ironic enough, with women's college basketball, but from the Black college perspective. We're also getting to all this stuff going on with the transfer portal and Black college basketball players hitting it and hitting it hard. And then we're going to go into the little Final Four talk, HBCU style. So, fellas, how was everybody's Easter weekend and everything else?
Oh, for me, well, I mean, I'm locked into the race war as well, but yeah, just spent some time relaxing, taking it easy, just you know, watching everything that's going on, across the sports landscape, which of course is what we do. So we had some news break over the weekend, with regards to the portal, and then some stuff late Sunday that we're going to get into in this episode. So very excited to discuss that with y'all today.
Yeah, we're pretty much in the off season of HBCU basketball now, but we still got track and field. We got baseball coming up, and as you said, we locked into the race war. So we got some exciting sports coming down kind of pike. And this month we have the NFL draft, so we have a lot to look forward to with some potential for HBCU prospects to either get drafted or be undrafted free agents. So I'm excited about that as well.
Yeah, there's never an off season for us. I mean, there's always something going on, something we're writing about, something we're talking about. It may be off season for the players and coaches when these seasons end, but for us, we got to bring it 7 days a week, 365. But our first topic is going to be about women's college basketball. It's going to be about a very prominent women's college basketball coach in the Black college basketball world, and that's State coach Tomekia Reed, who over the weekend it was reported by Rod Walker with the New Orleans Times Picayune that she actually interviewed for the Tulane job, for their head coach job. Over the it doesn't say when she interviewed, but Walker reported that it happened very recently. And it's not surprising at all that Tomekia Reed would garner any interest from any job in America outside Jackson State because of her success. She's led Jackson State to the tournament 3 times, had 2 undefeated seasons in the SWAC, 5 conference championships in the regular season. A coach who's garnered a lot of respect from the likes of Kim Mulkey, who's coaching tonight at LSU. And last week, Juno Ariema spoke very highly of her and her work after that game against UConn in the first round of the tournament 2 weeks ago. So, fellas, how surprised or not are you that Tomekia Reed is garnering interest from Tulane or any other school for that matter? I'll start with Chris on this one.
Not at all surprised. I mean, the woman's track record speaks for itself. I mean, you listed all the accomplishments. I mean, she's quite the accomplished women's basketball coach at an HBCU that, didn't have. I mean, I won't say Jackson State's had a horrible basketball program because that would be like, totally false. But, she's lifted them to another level. I mean, the seeds were planted for this in 2022. They're not. When Kim Mulkey was saying things like, she would be a great coach anywhere in America, and that irritated the what out of me because it's like it's bad enough that we lose players to the allure of PWIs and the national scope of things, but losing coaches, I guess it's going to come with the territory. When you have success, people are going to be looking out for you. But excuse me, for continuity's sake, Jackson State, I'm surprised they let her contract expire. If that's true, that her contract was supposed to expire last day of March. So I really hope that somewhere along the line they're getting the resources together to keep this woman because she could be the coach that breaks the 40-plus year glass ceiling for HBCUs on the Final Four front. Because of course the last and only to do it were the 1982 Cheney State Wolves led by the legendary C. Vivian Stringer. So we haven't had an HBCU in the women's Final Four in the Division I level in 42 years. So I'm not saying Tomekia Reed can get there, but she can put that program in position to get there. She's She's a great coach. She has a sterling personality. I mean, the players love her. Why risk it? And I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised at Tulane. It wouldn't be surprised if another. I mean, like even if like Louisiana Lafayette or Southern Mississippi or somebody or any other PWI in that area with a decent conference deal and an opening would interview Tomekia Reed. No, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, like her contract, as you mentioned, Chris, expired actually yesterday on Easter Sunday. In 2020, she signed a 4-year contract extension that paid her $135,000 per season. And she's outperformed that by leaps and bounds in that time. Jared, what would Jackson State be losing if she lands one of these jobs and decides to leave the program?
Excellence, a track record of excellence. That's what they would be losing. I've said this multiple times on this show, and I can't say it enough. In the past 5 seasons in conference play, she is 83-4. 83-4. She has won 3 of the last 4 SWAC tournaments. Just want to read this stat because this is just emblematic about how dominant she has been. Since 1983 until before she got hired in 2018, Jackson State had won the SWAC twice. In the past 4 seasons, she has won the SWAC 3 times. SWAC tournament. She's won the SWAC tournament 3 times in the past 4 seasons since 1983 into 2018 before she got hired. They had won the SWAC twice. So you will lose someone who established a winning culture within your program. You are losing somebody that has the pulse of the HBCU community. You will lose somebody that has a pulse on Jackson State in general. You will lose a lot of your recruiting because I'm pretty sure most of the recruiting that is done within Jackson State is the track record of Tomekia Reed and the success that she has had within this program and the guarantee that you are going to be a winner if you are a part of the Jackson State program. Now, that's not to say that you can't win without her. Potentially you could, but you've already established the winning culture with her. So why break down what is already working? What if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, obviously, we've seen with Willie Simmons, you can fundraise, you can bundle up all the resources that you have to try to keep them as much as you want, but sometimes it's just not enough. Hopefully, this is not that situation because Tomekia Reed is a gem to the HBCU community. There aren't many coaches with the track record that we have active right now. We have Robert Jones, we have Lavelle Moulton, but outside of them, and Larry Vickers as well with Norfolk State's women's team, but we don't have as many pillars in the HBCU community that we can honestly say are among the top coaches in college basketball, let alone HBCU basketball today. So we would be losing a highly influential figure if Tomekia Reed chooses to go elsewhere, whether that be Tulane or wherever else.
Yeah, I mean, Tomekia Reed has not only been sought after for this cycle of coaching, but the Clarion Ledger reported last year that she interviewed for a Pac-12 job, a Big 12 job, an American job, and a Mountain West Conference job, and she was actually a finalist, according to J.T. Keith with the Clarion Ledger, for a Power 5 job. But though that job wasn't disclosed by her, like you said, Jared, she really did build that program up to be what it is today. Jackson State women's basketball wasn't highly thought of before she got there, and she turned into a powerhouse to the point where now, if you go on her Twitter page right now, she got a tweet up that's talking about the transfer portal and how kids can come down the state, and she has a photograph with like all the transfers Jackson State was able to acquire over the years. Angel Jackson, the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year from USC. Daphne White, she got from Ole Miss. Amisha Williams-Holiday, who was actually drafted, she came from Mississippi State. Malika Woods also was a very good player for Jackson State. She came from the transfer portal too. So Tomekia Reed has really made a path on the transfer portal route to really build up the program. And wherever she goes, she's actually going to have that advantage if she leaves Jackson State or not. Like, hey, like I can get players from the transfer portal, and those players can be high impact players, and they can help our team, be successful. Now for Jackson State, I'm pretty sure Ashley Robinson, AD, who's done a great job at Jackson State so far in his hiring, not just for Tomekia Reed, but in other sports too. I know he's going to try to do his best to keep her around, but it's going to get difficult the more she wins, because the more you win, the more eyeballs that are going to be in your program and your coaches, and the more attractive your coaches are going to be to those programs. So it might not take an extraordinary effort to keep her, but it's going to take an effort nonetheless to try to keep one of the best coaches in America who's becoming discovered on a more broader scale than Jackson State maybe anticipated. Our second topic for tonight, we're going to talk about transitioning up to the transfer portal, is all the players on the men's and women's side jumping into the transfer portal. Now, we know the transfer portal is something that a lot of coaches, not just in basketball, but other sports, have kind of wrangled with over the last couple of years, and how active it's been. It's been beneficial for some programs, and it's been detrimental to others, but it definitely has had an impact on college sports in general. And today, Chris Stevens, you wrote that Jamari Thomas, Norfolk State basketball player, the MEAC Player of the Year, he actually entered the transfer portal, which is a surprise to me, because you would think like a guy who has such success in one season on Norfolk State would want to stay around and stick, but that wasn't the case. So, Chris, in your estimation, is the transfer portal for HBCUs going to be a hindrance in basketball, or just the lay of the land right now with the landscape going on?
The portal giveth and the portal taketh away, because Jamari Thomas, of course, came from UNC Wilmington, where he was starting to get some time in his second year. Didn't see much time his first year. Wasn't seeing much. Started to get some time in the second year, but decided to transfer to Norfolk State and had a dynamite year. What can we say? He was Player of the Year. He was Newcomer of the Year. He was the leading scorer in the infamous Illinois State game. I mean, the kid showed that he can play. So, I mean, a lot of the portal stuff, like I said last week, it's really a brand new shiny toy for these kids. Yes, it's going to be a problem, but the creative coaches will find a way around it. I mean, we just talked about it. I mean, Tomekia Reed has been hitting the portal up like it's her favorite. Wherever she gets those dope accessories that she's wearing on the sidelines. She's been hitting the portal up like wherever that store is. And she's got some very talented players, and it has worked out for her. So HBCU coaches, yeah, the portal is going to be a hindrance, but at the same time, if you play it right, you can make it work for your program. And I'm really going to be interested to see how a lot of these programs, on the HBCU level, counter it, because DSU has lost 3 starters in the last 8 days. Martez Robinson, who was the senior guard, he's in the portal. Devin Muniz, the sophomore guard, who would have teamed up great with Dewok Tavares for the next couple years. He's in the portal. Leslie Oba, the leading rebounder and shot blocker, he's in the portal now. So, it's going to, and Delaware State has some holes to fill. So many HBCUs around the country are going to have holes to fill with this portal, and they're going to be able to do it because there's a lot of disenchanted figures, not just at the HBCU level, but at the PWI Power 5 level as well. And I was talking to a parent the other day, because I posted something on my Facebook page. I said, these kids are going to learn about the portal and how a game of musical chairs is not going to be good for them. And a parent, came to me and said, a lot of these kids, they aren't exactly leaving on their own free will. Some of them are actually being shoved into the portal. And that probably is true. And so you could probably count on a few PWI kids, being left out in the cold because this hot, fresh new recruit is coming in. That's the perfect time for an HBCU coach to come in and say, hey, look, we know that coach did you. I mean, recruiting is a dirty MAC game. Let's just be real honest about it. It is a dirty MAC game. There's no loyalty. There's lawlessness. There's no loyalty. There's no, common sense to all of this. There's no. I mean, it's get the best players for your program. Period. And if you got the dirty Mac another coach, then doggone it, you're gonna have the dirty Mac another coach. That's what it boils down to. So HBCUs are going to have to, roll these up, roll the sleeves up, say, look, we know that PWI did you dirty. Come here. We got great fan support. We got the major that you want. We got NIL possibilities, and you can hit some of the guys with, for every guy at HBCU, there's 5 girls. You can do that. Whatever you got to do. That's how you're going to make it work with the portal situation, man. Because everybody, again, it's a lawless land out here, the world of college recruiting. So HBCU coaches are literally just going to have to get dirty whether they want to or not.
I like how you described it as lawlessness, like it's a campaign, like issue.
It's absolutely a Democrats versus Republican situation. Make no mistake about it. Like, we haven't even gotten to the nasty part of election season. God help us all. But this is the lay of the land now. Everybody's looking out for self. Everybody's out for something. So HBCU coaches, they can't be afraid, to ruffle some feathers. They gotta, you gotta knock somebody out of the way. Like, you gotta pull your best David Ruffin out after the Temptations fired him. You just got to start showing up the gigs and just grab the mic and sing. That's what you have to do now. So that's pretty much where it is.
Yeah, the transfer portal, at least from my perspective, gets demonized a lot because it all boils down to like players having all this control and like no one's really kind of like reining them in or has like the power to stop them. After for so long, the players really had no power, no control over their own college careers. But you're right, Chris. Like it's the wild, wild west out there, and the players are taking advantage of it. They're only exploiting the loopholes that are there. So the coaches and the schools gonna have to adjust to it. So Jared, is this a bad thing for black colleges, or can they like reap the benefits from it?
I think it really depends. I think the transfers that we have gotten in HBCU basketball have worked out for the most part. We had Jamari Thomas. We've had Zay Green on the women's side. You had you said it earlier. Misha Williams Holiday was a gold mine for Jackson State. You know what I mean? So it could work out for us, but the problem is that there's still a talent deficit between us and the Power Fives, and that's going to get into what we talk about later. When we talk about HBCUs being able to compete at the highest level and the tournament level and make it potentially past. We're still trying to get past the round of 32, let alone what we can do to get to the Final Four. So I think it's a talent deficit. I think we need to I think the transfer portal should be the least of our worries. What we need to worry about is, and I said it before, is the up and coming stars. We need to look at the high school level. I think the high school level is where we will find the talent that will be the future of our programs. Now, that's not to say that we won't get burnt by the transfer portal later. I think that's always a possibility that the transfer portal will, as Chris said, giveth and taketh away. You know what I mean? But I think that if you can get the recruiter's ear at the right moment, like whether they're a sophomore, whether they're a junior in high school, or even when they're a freshman and they're starting to come up at the varsity level in high school and they're starting to have success, then I think that's when you strike. I think, not to say it like that, like they're just a whatever, like just somebody that we're looking for their basketball talent. Of course, put the education into it. But like, if you want to build up our programs, we have to get them at the high school level, because that's when, that we have years to work with them. When you go into the transfer portal, more often than not, you got 1 or 2 years with the people that are coming from the transfer portal. Zay Green's one of the rare ones that we get 3 years with, so I think the transfer portal has ways of working out for us, but I think at the end of the day, we're still working at a talent deficit. And when you're dealing with a talent deficit, you need to build up programs, and to build up programs, it takes years. And to do that, you have to look at the high school level, because that's the only way that you will give yourself the right amount of time to be able to build up a program.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jared, in regards to schools having to look for developing high school kids, but the transfer portal still is going to be an issue because like every season you got to like re-recruit your own players too. And that's something that a lot of coaches really aren't used to, haven't been used to in their past, having to not only recruit guys from high school or recruit players who maybe want to transfer in, but also trying to keep the players who are currently in their own program. I mean, like it's a new frontier for a lot of coaches. I know, like a lot of them are old school. They say, well, if the player wants to leave, let them leave. But like, you really can't continue to build your program if you're losing players in the portal. Like your school, Chris, Delaware State, they made a run all the way to the MEAC tournament final, and they're losing guys in the portal. Like you can't build a program that way. Despite the fact, yeah, you might have some high school guys coming in, but like you're starting over again with like youngsters, like freshmen or redshirt freshmen, and having to like make that difficult journey through the season again with inexperienced players in order to be consistent, in order to be contenders, in order to when to make a run in the tournament in your conference or even the NCAA's, you're gonna need experienced players. And the tournament has showed like the team with the most experience normally advances deep into the tournament or actually win the tournament. So the transfer portal is going to be something that coaches and schools have to pay attention to. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Despite the efforts by the NCAA, despite the outcry, despite folks want to get Congress involved in NIL and all this stuff, it's never going to go away. The players are going to have the power because we're working within a framework where there's a lot of money and a lot of interest in all these sports. And so, in order to keep that money and interest, you're going to have to concede some power to the players, unfortunately, if you're a coach. But I'm all for player movement. I'm all for player control because there was a point where like coaches were literally restrict players from going to certain schools because they felt like it was a competitive disadvantage to them to let a player go to a certain school. Now, kids can go anywhere. I remember Bo Wine when he was coaching in Wisconsin. He had a list of schools players could not transfer to. Could you imagine that? These guys are not under contract. Their scholarships are only for 1 year guaranteed. And you telling me like I can't transfer to Purdue if I want to, or I can't go to Northwestern if I want to? It's just silly. Like if coaches can leave and go to any school they want to go to without repercussions, then the players should too. But
Yeah, and I think that's the flaw in the plan of building up high school players is that at the end of the day, high school these athletes have to look out for their own intentions at the end of the day. So if they feel like they want to take a gamble on themselves and move up to a bigger program and have success, like we've seen it work out in both ways in football and basketball. If you remember, well, not remember because he's not old, but Brian Cook, who is currently in the NFL with the Kansas City Chiefs. He started off at Howard, and then he transferred to Cincinnati, and he took a gamble on himself going to Cincinnati, and it paid off for him. He's now a two-time Super Bowl champion, currently injured. Hope he gets well, and he's able to start the 2024 season. And we've seen it work out for Tank Dell as well on the football level. He was with Alabama A&M, got hurt, went to the JUCO level, and then went to the University of Houston. Now he's on the Houston Texans, and he's also hurt. Hope he gets well soon. And we've seen it work out on the basketball level, where we've seen, I forget his name, but the guy that was the player of the year, the MEAC player of the year at Howard, and then he transferred to, I forget where he transferred to, but he ended up getting a G League contract and, going where he went. So we've seen it work out for players taking gambles on themselves, and a lot of guys feel the need to, go to those bigger programs because they feel like that's where the scouts are looking. They feel like that's where the most eyes are going to be. That's where they're going to get the best opportunities to showcase their skills because scouts are saying, the MEAC and the SWAC, that those conferences don't have the best records compared to an ACC, compared to an SEC, even compared to a Patriot League or a Mountain West Conference. So they're going to look at the competition that they're playing in those conferences, and they're going to respect it a lot more than them playing against the SWAC or the MEAC, even the CAA and the Ohio Valley conferences, who yearly don't have as good of record as those conferences that I just named. So I think that it's a flaw that we would be able to get those because as much as you build trust within a player, no matter how much you communicate with them on a daily basis, no matter how much you gain their trust and you gain that camaraderie with them, at the end of the day, they still have to look out for their best interest and what they believe will be the best option for them to make it at the pro level. So I think it's definitely a flaw within the system, but that's the best. I feel like that's the best opportunity we have, because we're not going to, I don't want to say that like we can't, because we definitely can, but it's much more difficult to get a player who was a SCC freshman of the year or ACC freshman of the year or a Big Ten freshman of the year that all of a sudden their minutes just dropped or they suffered injuries and they need somewhere to rejuvenate their career. That's much more difficult to compete getting those type of players than somebody who was a high school All-American or was a McDonald's All-American selection or somebody who was and who was the player of the year within their state and led their team to a state championship and they're on the rise. You know what I mean? So I think it's much harder to compete with those transfer portal guys because we're taking a gamble with them too. Because remember, Zion Harmon, who has entered the transfer portal as well, he was looked at as the next big thing for Bethune-Cookman when he came to Bethune-Cookman. He was a 5-star recruit. He was coming from, I forget where he decommitted from or where he transferred from, but he was looked at as a guy that could potentially be a game changer for Bethune-Cookman. And 2 years within Bethune-Cookman, it didn't really work out, and now he's back in the portal. So it's give or take when you're dealing with the portal. I think that the high school level is not as I'm not saying it's a significantly more of a sure bet, but it's a much better bet than betting on the transfer portal.
Yeah, Chris, I'm thinking about the column you wrote last week about how black colleges could advance in basketball. And one of the things you mentioned was schools taking advantage of the transfer portal. So how could black colleges be in position, or what advantages do they have to maybe acquire some of these players from the transfer portal and maybe also keep the players they already have?
I think what it's really going to boil down to is giving these kids the opportunity to. Free will is always going to be a thing now. Now that the portal is on and popping, but you have to give these kids a reason to consider your program. Like there's a gentleman that Jared's going to talk about shortly that has been in the portal twice and is still playing. And this is what you have to present to these kids. I mean, you can't look at the portal like, oh my God, this kid's been in there 2 or 3 times. What can we do? Or oh my God, this kid is he's coming from a program that has unlimited success. Why is he damaged goods? That type of thing. You just have to work with these kids. That's what it boils down to. Because again, as you said, Kendrick, you have to secede some power to them at some point. And right now, that's going to be the only way that HBCUs can really make an inroads, at least through the portal aspect of it. As far as on the floor, the talent gap is shrinking because basketball as we know it is not the same as it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 15 years ago. So many kids now, they see each other through these AAU competitions, these off-season tournaments where the mixtape crews come out and there are always going to be players that are head and shoulders above everyone else, but it's not going to be a case of just like where teams are just like building all-star rosters and dominating, because like you guys said about experience, you don't need to look no further than Kentucky's freshman getting kicked out of the tournament by a veteran, and I do mean veteran, Oakland University team. So what was homeboy's name? Jack Golke. He was a 4-year starter at a Division II, took his COVID year at a mid-major Division I, and literally shot Kentucky all the way back to Lexington. So you're going to have to build those type of rosters. You're going to have to look deep. You're going to have to search deep. You're going to have to say, okay, this kid, could help us. That kid can help us. And just, hodgepodge, put together some gumbo. Shout out to my Louisiana folks. Some gumbo. You make a gumbo of a basketball team, and you could have some success, because a lot of these guys that recruiting the one and dones. The one and dones, they want to get their moves off. They don't care about a team concept. That's what did Kentucky in. And that's what'll do any young team in if you have like a veteran team who knows how to run sets, who knows how to play defense, who isn't afraid to play defense. So there are a few ways you can knock on the door of the Final Four or Sweet 16 or what have you. It's just going to take a little longer than we anticipated, I feel like, with this portal situation.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take a while to get there. And the transfer portal is definitely one way to make your team good really quickly and be like Oakland or be like St. Peter or be like North Carolina State, for an example, who's in the Final Four this weekend. So, yeah, like it's definitely going to be something HBCUs is really going to have to attack, which ironically enough leads us perfectly into our next topic. The Final Four is this weekend. You got North Carolina State, you got defending champ UConn, you got Alabama, and you got 7'4" Zach Edey and Purdue in the Final Four. And North Carolina State is probably the Cinderella of the bunch. They came out of the ACC, 14 losses. They won ACC tournament and they made a miraculous run all the way to the Final Four. And one of the players, as you see on the screen here, is Cam Woods. He's been a big part of why they're in the Final Four. And he was a former black college basketball player. He played it in North Carolina A&T before he transferred to North Carolina State. And so thinking about the show today, I was contemplating, like how can we have a tie to the Final Four in our show, considering there's no black colleges in the Final Four on the men or the women's side. And Cam Woods kind of popped up in my head. And so the question I had was, what will it take for a black college to make the Final Four? We know schools are often put in a terrible position by their seeding. More often than not, we get the 16 seed in the playing game, the first four, whatever you want to call it, or we get a 15 seed against number 2 seed, and the odds of us winning those games aren't very good. And more often than not, we don't win those games, and those games are oftentimes blowouts, as evidenced by this season for Grambling State and for Jackson State, who both lost in the round of 32 in the first round. So fellas, I'll start with Jared on this one. What will it take for a black college to make a run to the Final Four?
It's difficult. It's really difficult to say, because as much as, you can do everything right. You can recruit high school stars. You can build up a program with the winning culture. You can do all the things that Tomekia Reed has done, that Larry Vickers has done, that Lavelle Moulton has done, that Robert Jones has done, and you can still be at a talent gap. Somebody said it earlier in the comments, is that one of the biggest reasons why we are not able to compete is that the size compared between us and the teams at the Power 5 level is just different. The size of our teams compared to theirs is different. The skill between our teams and theirs is different. You looked at Norfolk State and Stanford's women's tournament game, and you look at the size difference between Norfolk and Stanford. It's night and day. Stanford towered over them. They towered over them, and not to mention that they were just a better team. But it's just like, it's hard to manage what players are within our grasp. Case in point, one of the best players within who has really made a name for himself and has put on a star-making performance in the ACC tournament and now in the NCAA tournament is DJ Burns. DJ Burns is someone who went from Tennessee to Winthrop. For those who don't know, when he was at Winthrop for 3 years, Winthrop was in the Big South. You know who else was in the Big South? Hampton. You know who was in the Big South his last year of his time at Winthrop? North Carolina A&T. So that he was right there within our grasp. We have to have the right scouts and the right guys managing who is within the portal. If we're going to use the portal to build up our programs, then we have to have the right guys keeping an eye on who is in that portal and who is someone who is manageable, that is within our grasp, that we can build up, and that could be an asset to our programs. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then you talked about Cam Woods, who came from North Carolina A&T. You know, Matt, like what would it have took for us to keep him? Us as in HBCUs, but North Carolina A&T singularly. You know what I mean? Like, what would it have took for us to get DJ Horn, who's from Fayetteville? What would it have taken to get Casey Morcell, who went to St. John's College and is from Fort Washington, Maryland? You know, who, like, you look at all these guys, Fort Lauderdale. This is the NC State roster. Fort Lauderdale, Richmond, Durham, Reidsville, North Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina. Now, obviously, the school is in North Carolina, so they're going to be from schools that are in proximity to HBCUs, but it's still like, what would it have taken for them to come to us? What would it have taken for those guys to come to us? You look at all the guys from UConn. You know, not saying that we would have been able to get those guys, because UConn as a program, it transcends college basketball, like Duke, like UNC, like Louisville. But at these smaller Power 5 programs like NC State, like Virginia Tech, like that aren't very well known for their basketball success. Like those guys that have the size, that have the skill to be able to compete. What would it take for those guys to come to our program? The guys that, you know, may not feel like they're getting the right playing time, but they're a raw talent that could be built up and have a bright future and could be an asset to a program and building up a championship culture. You know, that's what these scouts have to find out. That's what these recruiters, I keep saying scouts, recruiters, that's what these recruiters have to figure out. Because I'm talking out the side of my neck. I'm not going to lie. I don't know what the answer is, but I just know that there is a lot of guys that are within our grasp that we probably could have had, but for one reason or another, they're not coming to us. Whether it's we need to use NIL more effectively, whether it's, you know, we need more people to be on hands-on and going to these players' games and showing them actual support, and not doing what all these other teams do, like sending them emails, correspondence, and just doing everything over the phone or on social media. Sometimes we just got to be face to face with it. Sometimes they have to see our face and let them know that we actually do care. And not to say that we don't, because we genuinely do care. So show them that you genuinely do care and go above and beyond more than any other coach is willing to do. Now, we might have to go deep into our pockets to be able to do that, you know, but at the end of the day, is it worth it compared to what all these other programs are doing? Can we potentially achieve that? You know, that's what these recruiters and that's what these administrators have to figure out.
Yeah, good points, Jared. I mean, like it's definitely a complicated issue nonetheless. Before I get to your thoughts, Chris, I'm gonna display a couple of quotes about this very topic and how it doesn't look very good for colleges to be in a position to go to the Final Four. First is going to be from SWAC Commissioner Charles McClellan, who's also the head of the Division I Men's Basketball Committee. You've probably seen him on TV when they show the sideline shots during the games. These are all important basketball games right now. But he was asked last year at the SWAC tournament, actually, about what would it take for a black college or a SWAC school or SWAC conference to get more than one team in the tournament. As you know now, the SWAC conference, like most mid-majors and small conferences, are one bid leagues. So whoever wins the conference tournament normally gets in. There's nowhere at large for us in the field of C8. So this is what he said. I'll make this bigger so everybody can see it. He said, ultimately, we want to be a conference that is not relying on the automatic qualifier. We want to be a conference that's not a perennial 16 seed, but that's going to take a lot of commitment outside of just wanting the conference offers can do. McClellan suggested that to reach the level of other Division I conferences, SWAC schools would need to bolster the academic athletic support systems, as well as funding capabilities. But smart scheduling, he said, will be necessary as relates to creating competitive balance. So he's basically saying there, like, we have to like boost our funding, have to boost our support. That goes not only with, I guess, more donations, getting more revenue streams, also in internal support as far as eligibility goes, as far as recruiting goes, as Jared mentioned, scouting players, high schools and other colleges as well, to try to build up their programs and the teams to the point where they can be competitive not only inside the SWAC but in non-conference play too, in order for teams to be much stronger and impress the community to the point where, hey, like, we can get more than one team in a tournament. And the second one I'm gonna display is from the mid majority. They basically cover mid-major basketball programs, and about, I would say, 10 years ago, they did their own independent study about what separates mid-majors from Power Five schools and why mid-majors seem to have so much trouble, at least then, advancing in the tournament. And here is what they said. So according to mid majority, in 2007, this goes back, they said they drew a red line across the center of Division One. So this pretty much separated the haves and the have-nots. It was called the red line. Above the red line, conferences with an average school athletic budget of $20 million or more, as measured by the U.S. Department of Post-Secondary Education. The Mid-Majority Institute of Basketball Research found that the 8 richest leagues beat teams in smaller conferences over 83% of the time. So we're talking about pretty much the teams that represent in the Final Four this year: the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big East, the Pac-12, the Power Five schools, because they had more money, they had more resources, which meant they had access to better talent, which meant they could recruit, which meant they had the advantages over the mid majors. I know a lot of that has changed since 2007, even since 2014 when I first discovered this. It seems like the smaller schools, the mid majors, is kind of like catching up a little bit, as we see by tournament results. But Chris, taking it all in, what McClendon said and what the Mid Majority Institute of Basketball Research indicated the difference between us and them. What do you make of the chances of a black school actually reaching the Final Four?
Well, it's definitely an uphill climb. Make no mistake about it. Everything that Dr. McClellan said, everything that the research says is that the deck has been stacked against us for years. Well, you can go way back to the earliest beginnings. I mean, when Alcorn State with Larry Smith was like 28-1, and they still got what amounted to, I guess, a 16 back in 1980 or whatever. So it's always been, our conferences, our schools have always had this reputation of not being competitive on a national level, and it's hurt us. I mean, Gino Auriemma said it last week when UConn beat Jackson State that they needed that they weren't getting a fair shake because people look at leagues like MEAC and the SWAC and say, okay, these are terrible leagues. They're only good in their league. But the more we compete, I mean, as I said, the basketball playing field, it's never going to be a case of, where PWIs or Power Fives just fall on hard times and HBCUs just take over. That's never going to happen. We've got Power Five coaches crying about AQs for crying out loud. So it's already just going to be one of those things where, you're fighting an uphill battle. But what I think it's really going to take is just a concerted effort to fundraise, get these, get some facilities up to par, get the recruiting up to par, make it palatable for these kids to say, okay, I like HBCUs, I like what they're doing, let me give this school a shot and see what happens. So it's just, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen in the next 15, 20 years, I don't think. I could be wrong, but stranger things have happened. So I just hope that, we take into account everything that's being presented to us. The groundwork has been laid. When the NCAA finally started letting HBCUs play on a national level, desegregation started to happen. And that's when, the SEC started taking football players from the SWAC. You saw, the Atlantic 10 and the Big East taking basketball players from the MEAC, SWAC, and CIAA. So you're literally just trying to undo 45, 50 years of resource building by a very, very powerful institution, and it's going to take about half that time at least to get things back to normal.
Yeah, is there any hope, guys? And I just thought about this. Is there any hope in maybe Black Hodges making deep runs in the tournament based on what we saw out of Norfolk State's men's team winning the CIT tournament? I know much smaller tournament, less prestigious tournament, but they won it nonetheless. And also the North Carolina A&T women's team going all the way to the WNIT Sweet 16. Can momentum be gathered, hope be gathered from those schools making their runs in their various tournaments? I start with Jared on that one.
So you're just talking about the CIT and the NIT?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a chance for us to make runs in those tournaments. I think the CIT tournament, Norfolk State's CIT tournament run was a bit of an anomaly because I think it was a lot of teams that turned down invites to the CIT tournament, and this was a rare instance in that there was only 9 teams that played in the CIT tournament. One of which was Alabama A&M, who Norfolk State beat to make it to the championship game before ultimately winning it against Purdue Wayne something. Yeah, but Fort Wayne or something like that. But I think there is a chance for us to win those games because if you look at the makeup of those tournaments, the NIT and the CIT and the Elemental P tournaments, like those, like there's so many alphabets. Like what's up with all these? But anyway, like I think if you look at the makeup of those tournaments, even though you look at the history and you see that there's a lot of Power 5 schools that have won those tournaments, the makeup of them are majority mid-majors. So I think when you look at our record against mid-majors in the regular season and you see that it's pretty solid, then you give us them in a tournament setting, I think we have a good chance against them. Now, granted, we haven't always had that success against mid-majors in the tournament. You know, we've never had anybody win the NIT tournament. I don't even think we've had anybody advance past the second round of the NIT tournament. The women's NIT, you know, you mentioned that we had North Carolina A&T make it to the Sweet 16, and if they're able to keep that team together, I'm not sure what the classifications of that roster are, what the classification of the players are, but if they're able to keep that team together, I like their chances to make a run at the CAA. And even if they don't win the conference, I like their chances if they make it back to the women's NIT. You know what I mean? I think that UAPB had Karai Beck not entered the transfer portal, you know, with Zay Green coming back, I think they would have had a chance to potentially, you know, make a run at the SWAC and potentially make it to the NCAA tournament. But if they didn't, I would have liked their chances in the women's NIT as well. You know, I think if Jamari Thomas had decided to stay, not leave after 1 year, you know, I think he would have helped Norfolk State, you know, get to the NIT and potentially have success when winning a game or two, if not making a run to the Sweet 16. You know, well, winning 2 would have got them to the Sweet 16. But anyway, you know, I think there's a good chance for us to win in those tournaments. You know, but it goes back to we have to bridge the gap in terms of talent and size. I think if we're able to do that, then we will have success. If you look at the makeup of the Norfolk State teams that were winning with Joe Bryan and Chris Bankston, if you look at the athleticism of that team, it was different. Chris Bankston was jumping out of the gym. And like you gotta have if you're gonna have players who are undersized, you gotta have players who are athletic like him. You gotta have the athleticism to offset the size difference. You know, but on the women's side, I definitely think so, because the women's side, you know, once you get to the top programs with the UConns, the Iowas, not with Caitlin Clark there, of course, LSU, South Carolina, and once you get past those programs, you're basically dealing with the middle of the pack. So I think it's much easier to compete in those tournaments, the WNIT and I think that's the only secondary women's tournament. Once you get past the teams that are in the NCAA tournament, the women's NIT is the middle of the pack, and I think that our best teams can compete with the middle of the pack in terms of Power 5 teams, especially the mid-major teams. Because if you look at Norfolk State, they did very well against mid-majors. I think they went 7-4 or something like that against mid-majors in the regular season, and most of those games, if not all of them, were without Diamond Johnson, excuse me. Sorry. But I think if we continue to recruit and we are able to bridge that gap of talent and size, I think, yes, we can definitely have a team that makes a run in the women's NIT, the NIT, CBI, CIT, Elemental P, Elemental G, all those tournaments.
Yeah, a lot of acronyms for postseason basketball terms, but I'm thinking about like a lot of people are saying, well, black colleges don't have elite players, they don't have the size, they don't have this, don't have that. But I remember, what was it, 2012 when Norfolk State they beat Missouri, the 15-2 upset, and Missouri had a player. Norfolk State had a player named Kyle O'Quinn, who actually was drafted by New York Knicks. Played in the league for a long time. I remember watching that game, and Kyle O'Quinn was the best player on the floor. Missouri literally had no answer for them. And a lot of people picked Missouri to go to the Final Four that year. This one had the Pressey brothers on the team from Missouri back then. They were like really, really good. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if Kyle O'Quinn could dominate Missouri, a team that's picked to go to the Final Four, does a black college really need that much talent? And we saw Oakland lose to Kentucky with a player who spent a bunch of years in college, ended up getting a TurboTax NIL deal 24 hours later. And he was completely unheralded. He's not an NBA player. None of the guys on that team are NBA players. Like Grand Canyon made a run in the tournament. I don't think any of those guys are going to go to the NBA anytime soon. Like Chris, like what do you think can make a black college a Grand Canyon or an Oakland or even a Norfolk State in back when they had Kyle O'Quinn? Like how can black colleges get there with the state they're in right now?
Well, you need Kyle Quinn is probably going to go down. I mean, well, he's definitely one of the best in the last 20 years. He may end up going down as one of the best big men to ever play at HBCU of all time because, I mean, of course, he played in the NBA for a decade plus. So, I mean, his track record is secure. I think what people should have really been paying attention to, honestly, is Florida Gulf Coast. That was the school that literally touched off all this mid-major mania because folks went nuts over Dunk City. I mean, people were going down to the campus finding out that this school had just opened like 10 or 12 years earlier and it was some kind of, feeder school or satellite school that just happened to, come into some land or whatever and, made itself a Division I school that ended up going to the Sweet 16, beating San Diego State and Georgetown, which, of course, John Thompson III, his job. So, I mean, I felt like Florida Gulf Coast was the program that HBCUs should have modeled themselves after. But I guess, like I said, it's just going to be a hodgepodge of things. You work the portal. Like Jared said, you reach out to these high school kids. You make your campus atmosphere for these kids something that they want to go to, something that they want to, reach, something that they want to be a part of. If you can do that, then you can really make things happen. So it's just, I mean, it's going to take some work and it's going to take a lot of, moving parts, as we like to say in our professional lives, because if you ever had a supervisor that said there's a lot of moving parts, you know what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of moving parts that is going to have to happen for HBCUs to crack the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight or the Final Four. But the good news is that these parts are not hard to get.
Yeah, the transport portal definitely kind of like evens the playing field a little bit, but you have to hit on the guys you bring into your program. They got to be the right fit for your program too. But fellas, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thanks for everybody for watching, contributing in the comments. We thank you greatly for doing that as always. Be sure to like our channel, subscribe to it to get more videos like this. We try to do a show every week, normally on the Monday night, as of tonight. Also, don't forget to like us on social media, on our Facebook page, on Instagram, and on Twitter X. And be sure to donate to us as well if you feel so inclined to through our website as well. Folks, we thank you for joining us tonight. I am Kendrick. That's Chris. And that's Jared. I didn't forget Jared this week. I know Jared's there this time. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. See you next week.